So, is there a hidden connection between Piper's iconic dagger Katoptris and the greatest inventor Greece has ever seen? We know that Daedalus has built some remarkable inventions over the years, not the least of which is the labyrinth, which is what he is best known for, but a whole collection of other trinkets and gadgets in his workshop and another library of projects that he kept on his laptop. We know that after he died, Annabeth began deciphering his designs, looking into the projects that he had in the works and the discoveries that he had made, but there's one invention that stands out, and we get to see it during the Battle of Manhattan during the last Olympian. When the campers get to the city and begin to fortify the island, Annabeth brandishes a shield, the design for which she got from Daedalus, on top of activating his automatons in order to help the campers ward off the Titans. The shield that she uses is a surveillance device that can bend light to show users the reflection of something that is happening far away, and Annabeth describes it similarly to how a mirror works. And the shield seems to resemble a less refined version of Katoptris, and Piper uses it to see prophetic visions, but we know that originally Helen used it as her source of news across the battlefield. So we know that the knife can send visions of the past or future, as well as capturing live events, and we think that there is a link between the two of them. We think that one of two things is happening here, the first of which is that Daedalus got the inspiration for the shield from the dagger, and he saw what the knife is capable of and tried to replicate the power for other uses. During the Trojan War, this would have been one of the most direct and not to mention the fastest ways of not just getting news of the war, but to scout enemy territory, spy on enemy tactics, and prepare for the incoming battle. So it would have been an incredibly useful tool to replicate. If Daedalus could distribute spyware en masse, then he could arm any legion that he wanted, so he went to work. What's interesting to note about the shield, however, is that Annabeth says she only found the design on Daedalus' laptop for the shield, and that the model was constructed by Charles Beckendorf based on the schematics that Annabeth gave him. Given how inventive Daedalus was, however, we find it hard to believe that he didn't at least craft a prototype at some point in the past, given that he lived for thousands of years, even if the exact model he built was lost to time. Remember, he had been trading his consciousness between automatons for millennia, but he only died during the Battle of the Labyrinth, so he had thousands of years to work on all of his projects. Since this was to be the sole function of his new tool, he probably decided to use something with a larger surface area that would be easier to view, so he selected a shield. The face is round, flat, and able to catch light from any angle, so it makes sense that he would substitute a dagger for a shield as he tried to recreate Katoptris. Eventually, after a lot of trial and error, we believe he was able to get the light to bend properly, but he still needed one key piece in order to make the entire design work, and there was a hint of magic, specifically, magic that fell under the purview of Apollo and his oracle. Right now, there is one defining characteristic that separates Helen's knife from Daedalus' shield, which is that Katoptris can tell the future, and the Trials of Apollo gives us an in-depth breakdown of all the possible ways that this can be achieved, but they all fall under the prophetic domain of Apollo. At this point, however, not only was Apollo still a god, but he was notoriously famous for restricting the power of the oracle. He has a very strict set of rules that only allows his chosen followers to speak of prophecies, and we see what happens when someone defies this decree in the diary of Luke Costello. In the Demigod Diaries, we meet a character of the name of Hal, who is the son of Apollo who has the ability to see the future. Apollo immediately warned him that this power was not meant for mortal use, that Hal was a cosmic fluke and he was meant to keep all prophecies to himself, no exceptions. Hal, however, defied Apollo and used the power of prophecy to save a young girl's life. But even though this was a noble act, Apollo was still furious that his son had defied him. He sealed Hal away in his family mansion for 40 years, took his voice and cursed him so that he could only speak through the vicious Lucrete that he was trapped with. Apollo imprisoned Hal for the rest of his life, dressed him in a snakeskin suit to remind him forever of the mighty Python, who Apollo had slain for corroding the power of prophecy. So needlessly to say, Apollo was very protective over his domain. Even though the story of Hal hadn't happened yet, this is proof that Apollo is incredibly volatile when it comes to prophetic magic, and mortals and demigods probably knew this, so it makes sense Daedalus wouldn't want to get anywhere near angering Apollo. But that's only under the condition that Daedalus respects Apollo. As it stands, however, we actually learn that Apollo and Daedalus had met, and that Apollo warned Daedalus not to give the labyrinth a consciousness, lest it grow out of his control and become larger than he could foresee. Daedalus, however, ignored Apollo's warnings, so now we know that Daedalus has a history of ignoring Apollo, and that Apollo has a history of fiercely protecting the power of prophecy. So from here, either Daedalus intentionally steered away from using prophecy magic to make the shield, or perhaps more frighteningly, he did tap into Apollo's magic. In the Battle of the Labyrinth, when Percy suggests using magic to transfer the soul of a person into a machine, Daedalus responds in distaste, as if he abhors the use of magic and only wants to use machines. On the surface, this already makes sense, but if this theory is to be believed, then this disdain might be due to prior experience that didn't bode well for him last time. We also know in the Greek hero's companion novels, Percy admits that dreams are often flawed. He specifically cites Daedalus to support his point, but let's get back to the matter at hand. Despite Apollo's wrath, someone was able to construct a dagger with the ability to see visions into the future, and we don't technically know for certain who actually forged the blade, but it is one of a kind. This is not the kind of weapon that can just be put together by any blacksmith in the land, so whoever built this was the absolute best of the best to get it to work, and there is a very real possibility that despite his fear, Daedalus was somehow able to do it. But there were consequences. The reason why we bring up the story of Hal and the Wrath of Apollo is because we believe that if Daedalus did build Katoptris and somehow found a way to utilize prophetic magic for himself, he was severely punished for it. When Annabeth got his design, Charles and the Hephaestus cabin built it based off the blueprints that Daedalus left behind, but may not have had the tools or the know-how to reconstruct the prophetic side of the shield, and Daedalus himself might have taken that secret to his grave. Right now, we don't know exactly what his punishment at the hands of Apollo could have been, but we do know that he suffered years of abuse at the hands of King Minos, that he was driven into hiding and lived a miserable existence for thousands of years. Any of this could have been contributed to Apollo, and if he knew the danger that came with abusing the power of prophecy, then he might have intentionally omitted that part of the schematics from the shield in order to ensure that no one who ever used it would fall under the wrath of Apollo. This way the shield could still be built and used for noble purposes, but it wouldn't cause anybody to anger the gods more than was absolutely necessary. But from here we are left with two options on what may have happened, and we'd like to hear your thoughts on which of the two ideas you like better. Option 1 is that Daedalus saw the power of Katoptris and wanted to create a device like this for himself. And while this explains the origin of his video shield idea, it doesn't answer who created Katoptris and why it was such a one-of-a-kind idea. Option 2 is that Daedalus himself built the knife, and quickly realized that the power of prophecy was not to be left in the hands of the untrustworthy. But that's our breakdown, and we're really interested to hear your thoughts on the matter. As always, we love this series, we love talking about this series, and we want you to join in the conversation and let us know what your take on this idea is. Take care, my friends, don't anger the gods, and we'll see you in the next one.